The Battle of Hue was far from decided when I got in there. I went in with the Marines.
If the communist intention was to take and seize the cities, they came closer here at Hue than anywhere else. And now, 3 weeks after the offensive began, the firing still goes on.
We flew out of Hue in a helicopter loaded with body bags of dead Marines. As I heard the leadership say, now we've got the Viet Cong on the run. Give us 150, 200,000 more men and we'll finish them off. Well, I couldn't help but think, tell that to the Marines. Tell that to those guys in that chopper.
Tonight, report from Vietnam.
When I came back, we did a documentary. In the conclusion of that, with a full disclaimer that I was now going to give my personal opinion, I simply told people what I thought about the state of the war in Vietnam, and it was that we better get out of it.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
It was difficult to do that because we'd never done anything like that before.
But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
After that report, I recall that LBJ said to many of us that if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the war.
This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
Maybe it was egotistical of me, out of us, to think of doing that, but that was our judgment at the time.
As there is this display of enthusiasm for Vice President Humphrey here in the hall, there has been a display of naked violence in the streets of downtown Chicago, swirling around the Conrad Hilton Hotel.
I don't think any of us were really prepared for the extreme bitterness that showed up between the police and the Vietnam protesters at that '68 Democratic Convention.
The CBS News producer Phil Shuffler, the witness to that Hilton violence, said it seemed to be unprovoked on the part of the demonstrators. He said the police just charged the demonstrators, swinging at the crowd indiscriminately. Inside the Hilton, up on the 15th floor.
Well, Mayor, so far as you know, the police did not respond with undue violence down there?
They never do. Our police department is the greatest police department in the United States.
Richard Daley was the mayor of Chicago, and he was a very tough machine boss. He ran Chicago, and he was going to run that convention.
What's your name, sir? Take your hands off of me.
Dan Rather.
Unless you intend to arrest me, don't push me, please.
Dan Rather got manhandled by Daley's people on the convention floor.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Well, Walter, as you can see...
I don't know what's going on, but these are security people apparently around Dan. And obviously getting roughed up.
We tried to talk to the man, and we got bodily pushed out of the way. This is the kind of thing that's been going on.
I've found I lost my temper at that moment.
I didn't do very well.
I think we've got a bunch of thugs here, Dan.
I meant it. I mean it to this day. They were thugs. Sometimes I think it's perfectly legitimate for an anchor person or a news person on the air to let people know he's got a few feelings of his own about what's happening there.
This sort of thing continues. It makes us, in our anger, want to just turn off our cameras and pack up our microphones and our typewriters and get the devil out of this town and not leave the Democrats to their agony.
The generation gap was clearly apparent in the 60s as the youth revolution took place. The entire moral upheaval that some of us didn't understand and didn't participate in. The dope culture was part of it, of course, the rock and roll culture. I think it all really started with the birth control pill, probably, relaxing the morals of the kids. During that period, I made the declarative statement. I don't care for their hair, I don't care for their looks, I don't care for their clothes, I don't care for their behavior, I don't care for anything about them.
And I'm sure that we didn't care for their clothes or behavior either.
I was very much the hippie. went to demonstrations and that sort of thing?
Oh, I was very against Vietnam. And we used to have arguments with my cousin who was in the Army. We used to have pretty vicious arguments about it in inappropriate times like Thanksgiving dinner and that sort of thing.
There was that tension of really loving my parents very much and of being pitted against them.
I don't think there was ever a more difficult parental period in our history as there was for us who had teenage children in the 1960s. Woodstock is a case in point. That summer of '69, Kathy, our daughter, called us from school and she said, "We've been invited to a concert and I need $5 to go." Mother and I just jumped to a conclusion that this was probably with the New York Philharmonic or some such concert of the type.
Then we drove up to our country house, and by the time we got there, we were hearing on radio about this Woodstock. Got up there and turned on the television, hear these people in the mud and naked and...
The sun come up the Jefferson Airplane or something.
And we thought, wasn't that a terrible thing? Oh, that's just awful for those kids to... Awful. Woodstock. Concert. Could that be where Kathy is?
I immediately got separated from the group, and for a while nobody knew who I was.
And we started checking around, and we hadn't really completed our check yet until we got the first phone call from her. I'm all right, I'm all right. Turned out she was at Woodstock.
When I came home, they never mentioned it. They just didn't want to deal with it at all.
We weren't speaking for a while.
The times were changing fast. Young people wanted change. Women and minorities wanted change.
We had to liberate ourselves as women.
It was a time of enormous pressure and enormous expectations.
This is where it all begins, the 36th Democratic National Convention. Tonight, 1 out of every 3 delegates down there will be a woman. 1 out of
Suddenly,
every
in the largely male world of journalism, there were all sorts of minefields out there.
The right of equal participation of women.
One involved language.
Like the women's lib people don't like the word chairman, so it's chairperson.
That sort of thing I've considered tomfoolishness at the beginning. I was corrected on that rather quickly.
The highest position a man can, or a woman, can reach.
I think, as a matter of fact, they were probably right.
I don't remember feeling angry specifically with Walter Cronkite because there were so many worse things going on.
That this was a different convention.
From CBS News Convention Headquarters in Miami Beach, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Charles.
We had some interesting impromptu moments on the evening news. Once, a couple of young men who said they were journalism students wanted to see the broadcast, so we let them stand in back of the studio, in back of the cameras there. Suddenly, they broke from the background and they ran in front of the cameras.
Kissinger is in London now.
CBS's policy.
Frankly, I was a little frightened at first. I didn't know if they might have guns or knives. I didn't know what was going on.
Well, rather interesting development in the studio here. A protest demonstration right in the middle of CBS News studio.
Over the years, I've kept in touch with one of those young men. His name's Mark Siegel. Brilliant young fellow. He operates a gay newspaper in Philadelphia, and very successful.
3, 2, when we continue, Cronkite Remembers, the greatest adventure of all.
18 minutes to splashdown now as Apollo 13 comes hurtling back toward Earth.
I don't know to this day how much Mission Control knew that they didn't tell us.